establishment of nursery stock is to transplant high-quality plants using good planting procedures and planting the right tree in the right place. Stress and physiological disorders can often be traced to improper planting practices and poor species selection. Many tree planting traditions have been passed down through generations in the landscape and arboriculture industries. While some of these techniques are still recommended today, others have been changed to reflect current research and technology. A well-informed arborist should be aware of the latest techniques in tree planting and transplanting. After completing the following lesson, the reader will 1. Learn the techniques and procedures used to plant trees. 2. Understand how using proper techniques can improve survival and accelerate establishment. 3. Be familiar with the various types of nursery stock. 4. Understand that each stock has its advantages, limitations, and proper planting techniques. A point that cannot be overemphasized is the importance of matching the tree and its requirements to the planting site conditions. The best-known planting procedures will not save a tree that is poorly suited for its site. The tree must be able to tolerate site conditions such as wet or dry soils, space limitations, or shade. Selecting a species that meets the site requirements is one of the most important factors influencing the success of the tree. It is important to select a tree that is healthy and vigorous. When selecting trees, examine the entire tree, especially the root ball. Survival and new growth are dependent on water absorption capacity and stored carbohydrates. The amount and condition of the roots in the root ball greatly affect transplant success. Inspect the root system of bare root stock as well as containerized and container-grown trees to make certain that the roots are alive and healthy. New roots are usually white to light tan in color. When selecting containerized trees, slip off the container to inspect the roots around the sides and bottom of the root ball. When inspecting balled and burlapped trees, check to see that the ball is solid with little or no movement at the trunk. Locate the trunk flare and ensure that it is not buried within the root ball. Avoid plants whose primary roots encircle the trunk. Wounds on the trunk or branches of the tree may cause decay and disrupt vascular system flow. Also, they may become entry sites for insects or disease. To help avoid mechanical damage during transport, trunks are often wrapped. The wrapping should be removed and the trunks inspected for damage before accepting and planting the tree. It is also important to select plants with good branching structure. Trees that exhibit poor form, such as codominant stems and included bark within the branch unions, may require increased pruning and corrective maintenance. There are 4 types of nursery stock: bare root, containerized, container-grown, or balled and burlapped. Each type has its advantages and disadvantages. Cost, as well as site requirements and planting specifications, often dictate stock type selection. There are 4 types of nursery stock: bare root, containerized, container-grown, or balled and burlapped. Each type has its advantages and disadvantages. Cost, as well as site requirements and planting specifications, often dictate stock type selection. Bare root trees are usually small and easy to transplant. Because there is no soil surrounding the root system, they are lightweight, which reduces shipping costs and facilitates handling at the job site. Note that without the added weight of soil to help anchor the root mass, trees that are planted bare root may require staking. When planting bare root trees, it is vital that the roots be kept moist. Bare root trees are normally planted during the dormant season before roots and buds begin to grow. If not planted immediately, bare root trees should be stored cold, 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 to 5 degrees Celsius, with moist packing material around the roots. Usually, only deciduous trees or conifer seedlings are handled bare root. Bare root trees should be planted with the main structural roots near the soil's surface. Planting holes should not be dug so deeply that loose backfill is required to elevate the tree to the correct height. Roots should be spread and distributed to prevent kinking or circling. Exposure of the roots to air can lead to desiccation. Thus, the backfill should be placed firmly around the roots to minimize air pockets. It is also recommended to water as you gradually backfill the planting hole. Some bare root trees require a pre-planting procedure known as sweating to break dormancy and begin growth. Sweating is an artificial and accelerated spring warming period. Species that often require sweating include the following: common hackberry, Celtis occidentalis, birches, Betula species, honey locust, Gladitsia triacanthos, sugar maple, Acer saccharum, and most oaks, Quercus species. In the sweating procedure, the root system of a bare root tree is surrounded by a moisture-holding material such as straw or burlap, and the entire tree is wrapped in plastic to retain a high level of humidity. The trees are then placed in a warm, shaded area until the buds start to swell and bud scales separate. The tree is ready for planting as soon as the bud swelling begins. Note: failure to plant before or immediately after bud break may lead to plant death. The root system of a containerized tree is surrounded by soil or a substrate that is held within a container. Not all containerized trees are container grown. Often, bare root trees are established in the nursery and then sold in containers. If they have recently been potted, there will not be an established root system in the container. Containers must be removed before planting unless they are biodegradable, such as natural peat pots. It still might be preferable to remove a biodegradable container unless the root system will not hold together without it. When selecting containerized trees, the root system should be checked. Sometimes the roots will have grown in circles and matted within the container and must be pulled apart. If properly watered and maintained, container-grown trees can be planted any time of the year that the ground is not frozen. If planted after leaf drop, roots can begin establishment before the next growing season. Stock with circling roots is mechanically unstable and more prone to environmental stress. Circling roots must be separated, spread outward, or cut when planting. If the roots are densely matted, the outside of the root mass should be pulled apart or cut to help separate the roots. Roots should regenerate quickly, and the mild stress is preferable to the development of circling roots. Large roots that grow across or around a stem root are called girdling roots. Girdling roots can choke off vascular tissues in the tree, leading to the decline and death of limbs or even the entire tree. Girdling roots are often associated with planting too deeply or with compacted soil beyond the root ball. Girdling roots can develop from circling roots in container-grown or containerized trees. Many trees are balled and burlapped in the nursery. In this process, trees are dug with a portion of the root ball remaining intact and wrapped with burlap. Although some roots are preserved within the root ball, it is estimated that as much as 90% of the absorbing roots can be lost in digging. The burlap and twine used to wrap the root ball keep the surrounding soil in place. This minimizes root exposure to air and reduces the risk of root breakage. Natural fiber burlap is biodegradable, but some nurseries use treated or synthetic burlap. Because burlap may act as a barrier to root growth, it is recommended that the top and upper side portions be removed, even if biodegradable burlap was used. It is imperative to remove synthetic burlap. The burlap is often held in place with twine. All twine, whether natural or synthetic, tied around the trunk of the tree must be removed to avoid girdling the tree. Some larger balled and burlapped trees come in wire baskets to maintain the integrity of the ball during handling. In some soils, wire baskets can last decades and may partially girdle roots as the roots grow and expand. Low-profile baskets have been designed to minimize interference with the main support roots of a tree. If a traditional basket is used, however, it is advisable to remove as much of the top portion of the wire as is practical. Doing so allows roots to grow and spread freely near the surface. This should be done once the tree is in place to avoid damage to the root ball. The most vigorous root growth occurs near the surface. Root growth from the lower portions of the ball is often reduced due to inadequate soil drainage and aeration. This should be taken into consideration when digging the planting hole. Ideally, the planting hole should be 2 or 3 times the width of the root ball at the soil surface, sloping down to about the width of the root ball at the base. The most vigorous root growth occurs near the surface. Root growth from the lower portions of the ball is often reduced due to inadequate soil drainage and aeration. This should be taken into consideration when digging the planting hole. Ideally, the planting hole should be 2 or 3 times the width of the root ball at the soil surface, sloping down to about the width of the root ball at the base. Because the planting hole may act as a dish and hold water, especially in compacted or clay soils, oxygen levels in the bottom of such holes are low and not conducive to rapid root growth. To the extent that it is practical, larger planting holes are always recommended. The most common planting mistake is planting too deeply. The planting hole should never be deeper than the distance from the trunk flare to the bottom of the root ball. Planting too deeply can occur unintentionally because containerized and balled and burlapped trees often arrive from the nursery with soil too high over the primary structural roots. Because the trunk flare is not always visible on young trees, it is imperative that the primary structural roots be located. At least 2 primary roots must be located within 1 to 3 inches, 2.5 to 7.6 centimeters, below the soil surface. Root depth can be measured using a surveyor's chaining pin or stiff piece of wire at a distance of 4 inches, 10 centimeters, from the trunk. If there are no roots in the upper portion of the root ball, the root system may be undersized and consideration should be given to rejecting the tree. Once the actual root depth is determined, the hole can be adjusted to ensure proper planting depth. For instance, if the root ball measures 16 inches, 41 centimeters, deep, yet there are 3 inches, 8 centimeters, of soil over the primary roots, the planting hole should be dug to a depth of 13 inches, 33 centimeters. Planting a tree too deeply can stress, drown, or suffocate roots. It may also enable soil-borne pathogens to enter the trunk.